Alpha.
Welcome back to the photography show and the video show. Spring shoots on this, well, where I am today, sunny spring afternoon. Thank you for taking time out of your weekends to join us. I hope that we're keeping you entertained, informed, engaged with all the various different types of imaging conversation that we've been having over the last day and a half. And the conversation continues with friend of the show, Sam Pilling from Sony. Sam, thank you very much for joining us. You have got something there which is, if cameras came off of a press, it would be hot off the press. But this is a hot new piece of equipment that I think we saw spoken about and maybe released elsewhere a little while ago, but it is now available in the UK and you've got one in your hands. Tell us a bit more about the A1.
Thank you very much, and thank you for having me. I have genuinely been looking forward to this session because I look forward to all of my photography show sessions, I should say, but this is the opportunity to talk about a camera which almost has everything. And you're right, the stock first started shipping just a couple of weeks ago. Most people won't have had the chance to be hands-on with one. So it's a great opportunity to tell customers, viewers, what really makes this camera special. And as I wouldn't call it an exclusive because it's me, but I went out on Friday, a little walk, just to test the technology, and it shouldn't surprise me because I'm supposed to be, Sony biased, but it is mind-blowing. I've got a little bit of video to show you later, which I can't believe what it can do.
All right. So let's take a bit of a step back. Sony. The A1 sounds like it should be like the first in the range, like one that came out many, many years ago. So where does this fit? And I know the price tag, so I'm going to have a good guess, but where does it fit in the overall range of Sony cameras?
This is the very top. We've previously had different families of cameras. We have our APS-C Sensitive 6 series cameras. We have our very popular A7s, which are our full frame range, which come in different families of R for resolution and S for sensitivity. We have our A9s, which are professional workhorses, which are all about speed. And then this is the very top, because what you can say about this camera is it combines lots of technologies from the other cameras. And I like the fact that it's called the One, because it could quite possibly replace several different cameras with just one camera body that appeals to a wide range of people.
Super. So in that case, what is it that makes this a top of the tree star camera then? Is it the specs? Is it the different use cases? Just chat us through why one would look at this camera as the one.
Okay, so it's a 50 megapixel camera and it shoots that at 30 frames per second. Not only that, it takes autofocus and auto exposure readings 120 times every second, and it has a viewfinder that can refresh 240 times a second, meaning if you're shooting panning video, it's very, very easy to track your subject. And the cherry on the top is it shoots 8K video. So for us, it's the combination of our Exmor RS sensor, the state-of-the-art imaging sensor. This is a brand new one, being 50 megapixel. We've not seen this one before. And then our Bion's XR processor, an incredibly fast, almost computer processor inside the camera to make sure it can really handle that vast amount of data that's being thrown at the processor. We're dealing with 30, 50 megapixel shots every single second. And when I went out on Friday, I was kind of like blown away that I shot in just JPEG, and within a couple of minutes, I got carried away. I'd racked up over a gig and a half worth of photos. It is just so fast. And then you combine that with new technologies such as, for the first time ever, we can shoot silently, so an electronic shutter, but also with flash. And that's a genuine first. It's something that we've not been able to do. And you might expect from the Sony fast autofocus, not only does it have our eye autofocus technology, but it uses 759 phase autofocus points to track a subject wherever it goes. I threw a lot of spec in there. I hope that wasn't too heavy.
No, there is a lot of spec in there, but the headline for me, and I guess this just indicates how powerful this appears to be, is the 50 megapixel sensor at 30 frames a second. that opens this up for an awful lot of use cases. So tell me a bit more about where you see this camera being used, which professionals will be most eager to get their hands on this, or is it, as you say, the one camera that actually fits quite across a lot of different use cases in the professional sphere?
It's fair to say that we've had a lot of interest from a wide variety of photographers. Some of it has been very much focused on sports, and it's already been out to football grounds around the country, and I've seen some stunning shots which it just captures every split second when it comes to sports. So when the footballer kicks the ball, you can see not only the detail of the grass being cut by thanks to the 50 megapixel, but you can really cherry pick the moment that you want to capture. But I've never had so many friends on Facebook, it's weird. I've also had lots of wedding photographers get in touch because they appreciate the fact that it's 8K, really lends itself to high-end video production, and also being able to shoot silently. It's something which really does make a difference. I wouldn't want to pigeonhole it because it appeals to so many different people, but I think news and sports is a real obvious use for it based on the ability to capture that super high frame rate.
Yeah, sports, nature as well. And one of the things that's very important for both sports and nature photography, wildlife, I guess, is autofocus. So just chat us through some of the autofocus smarts on here and any of the new features that might have been introduced here with the A1.
Yeah, sure. I mean, we have extremely fast phase autofocus, 759 phase autofocus points. So it can track a subject pretty much wherever it goes. And it's very, very easy to control because you have a touch screen on the back where you can hit and you can follow whatever you want. But the thing I was going to tell you about on Friday was I took a walk down the canal, and one of the features that this particular camera now has is animal eye autofocus for birds. This is the first time that we've had this, and hopefully my video will run. This is me walking down the canal, very influencer style by shooting myself, very arrogant, I know. And I got the camera out, and the very, very, very first shot surprised me because there was a goose. Oh, is that paused? Oh, I think my video is paused. No,
it has here.
Oh dear, let me try again, but I really want to show you this because I'm hoping it's not going to stop again. I don't know why it would stop because it should, it jumps.
There we go.
No, I think I've got technical issues. The thing is, it managed to shoot an image of a goose miles away. I must find a way of showing you that video because it really was a tiny, tiny eye miles away from me. And the camera recognized it and it tracked it wherever it went. So for me, this is something that I've not seen before in a camera, that something so far away and so small, the camera was intelligent enough to recognize that eye, which means our focusing is going to be all sorts of nature photography. It's just going to open up the ability to shoot with fast phase autofocus, be able to shoot with wide open aperture, which is always difficult with wildlife photography because you've got a moving subject and the focus needs to keep up with it, and making sure that, you know, being able to intelligently follow your subject takes far less pressure on the photographer to work on his composition whilst also worrying about focusing at the same time.
And talk to me about lenses then. Does the autofocus smarts that you talk about there require any particular lenses in order to keep up?
Actually, that's a really, really good question because not every single lens will be able to focus and shoot at 30 frames per second just because the strain that it puts on the autofocus system. We have a wide range of 59 different lenses, 39 of which are full frame, and our G Master series are our premium lenses. And I'm happy to say that every single one of those lenses in the G Master range will shoot no problem 30 frames per second, with just one exception, which is our 85mm f1.4. As for the other lenses down the range, we have a full spec sheet explaining which ones are compatible with 30 frames per second. But obviously, there are still very, very high frame rates that you can still shoot at with lesser lenses.
I should say, anyone watching today, and I know you are, some of you are already asking questions. If you've got a question for Sam about the A1, then pop it in to the chat window. If you haven't found that yet, look at the top right, just to the top right of this video panel. Ask your questions here, and we'll do our best to get through as many of those as we can. Sam, I want to talk about video. Video's my main area of work, certainly. You mentioned 8K video. Just chat us through the video capabilities of the A1.
So with this, we can shoot 8K video at 30 frames per second. And that has 15 stops of dynamic range. So it looks absolutely incredible. We can also shoot 4K video at 120 frames per second in slow motion where there's no sound, or 60 frames per second continuously with sound. That means if, like the example of a wedding photographer, you want to shoot an entire wedding in high frame rate with audio, looks like normal video, at any point you can slow that video down to half speed. So if it's the bride walking down the aisle, you want to make it look cinematic, then you can slow it down. And you can shoot in log and gamut, and also our recent released color space called S-Cinetone. S-Cinetone has proved a real hit already because it achieves in-camera cinematic look and color. And it means that videographers need to do no or very little post-processing to grade their video afterwards to achieve a really great cinematic look.
Talk to me about 8K though, because many of us are just upgrading to 4K camera gear, and that there are 4K TVs out there. I've got 4K TV at home. Certain clients are asking for work in 4K as now, but very often 4K is useful as a videographer because it gives you a little bit more latitude to punch in a little bit if you're delivering a 1080p final asset. When it comes to 8K, how's that going to be useful? Is that just even more latitude when I'm punching in? Because I guess the cost of running at 4K and then 4 times that cost potentially of running at 8K is storage media. So talk me through the 8K story if you can.
That's a really, really good point. And yes, not many people currently have 8K TVs, but there is a demand for high quality video, which can be played back on large screens. And it's the future. We're embracing future technology, but you're absolutely right. The key usage initially for most people, I would imagine, is punching in. And for people who haven't used 4K to re-render as 1080p and using that punching in technique, it really does have advantages. I recently shot a series of videos on some of our new products, and due to COVID, I'm shooting on my own. I don't have a camera operator, I don't have a B-cam operator, so it's all down to me. And my intention was to produce the videos in high definition, and most people would expect then you would shoot in high definition. But just like you say, by shooting in 4K to produce HD, I can punch in, and it's very, very simple to do as a process. But it means that if I need to switch between 2 shots to hide a cut, maybe I've fluffed my lines and I want to remove it, it means I can dial straight into the video and make a cut that looks like it's from a different camera, whereas it's the same camera, just at a different scale. So again, with 8K video, that gives us a fantastic ability to do that, either for HD, or more recently, if we're producing 4K video, it gives us that same ability of punching in. So it makes your workflow a lot easier. And this video, you can still shoot to sort of standard SD cards. We do have a new format inside this camera, which is CF Express Type A cards, which we brought in with the A7S Mark III. They're incredibly high speed, but you only actually really need them for the highest frame rate videos. So the 120p 4K video is the only time you actually need those cards. You can still use normal SD cards with those. So if you're shooting 8K, you can also shoot with proxy video. So you have lower resolution copies of your files, makes both transferal very easy because the camera, as you might expect, has Wi-Fi. So if you were shooting with very strict time constraints, you could shoot your video both in 8K or 4K and proxy. You then transfer that to your mobile phone, and I should mention workflow a bit more later on, but you transfer it to your mobile phone, send your proxy files back to your editor, so your editor begins the edit on the work. You then return back to base with the original files on the SD cards, and the proxy files are replaced with the originals for part of the rendering process of the video. Video as well is captured in 10-bit in S-Log, and we can do full 16-bit 4.3K raw output from the HDMI cable. So it really is designed for high-end professional workflow.
Yeah, and a good clean raw HDMI out feed is also going to be really important for a lot of videographers, and particularly people who are shooting on a camera but still want to have the benefit maybe even of using an external recorder for workflow purposes. In terms of audio, I take it you've got microphone in on the A1 as well? Yes, absolutely. There's a standard microphone jack on the side. I do have a top-down camera I can show you the inputs on. The side flaps open up. There's different compartments for different options, but we have just at the top there, we have a microphone and a headphone jack. But also, if you want to, you can connect up XLR microphones via either an adapter, and you can also use our digital microphone. This is our ECM B1M, and this is slightly different from the other microphones in our range, because it is both an analog, if you've only got an analog system, or a digital microphone, which when I plug this into the hot shoe, will capture the audio in the capsule, convert it to digital at a very early stage, and then it remains in a digital format all the way through until it's eventually stored on the SD card. That means it's far less likely to suffer from any form of interference. So really good audio quality, and I know that's really, really important to a lot of viewers. But yes, it might be a fantastic 8K video camera, it might take incredible stills, but yes, there's lots and lots of options to use this as a professional video and audio recording device. Again, do keep your questions coming in for Sam. Sam, I noticed you've got that top-down camera. One thing we haven't done yet is have a kind of have a look at what the camera format is in your hands. Could you just show us, switch to the top-down, and then just show us around the camera and show us where those ports are and what the back and the front look like? Yes, absolutely. So one of the key differences is the viewfinder, which is far larger than a lot of our previous models. And this viewfinder makes it so easy for framing your shot, and it's really high quality. I mentioned before that it refreshes up to 240 times a second. So it's also quad XGA, so it's our highest ever resolution viewfinder. So really great for framing your shots. As you'd expect, we have a pull-out screen on the back, so it's very easy to angle it, and that's a touch screen, so I can change my focus points with that. I can change my menu options. There's a slightly larger than normal record button up at the top, and then a lot of the ergonomics will feel very familiar to existing A9 users. It has dual dials on the left-hand side. There's one to control the autofocus settings, so do I want it in manual focus, constant autofocus, that sort of thing, and there's a dial here to change the drive mode. On the other side, as you'd expect, we have a traditional mode dial, which both these top two dials, well, all three top dials here are lockable, but you have a standard mode dial here, an exposure compensation dial here, and then we have the usual dials for changing ISO, aperture, shutter speed. On the back, there's another dial, and it's covered in custom keys as well, so it's very easy to customize this camera. The ports on the side, it might be important to some people to know that we have a full-size HDMI. So I've had lots of fun in the past with accidentally pulling out micro HDMI cables out of my cameras. This is a full-size HDMI. And we've also got a USB-C connection here. And I mentioned before that I wanted to talk a little bit about workflow. With this particular camera, we have Wi-Fi built in, so you can transfer your images to a Wi-Fi network. You could transfer your images physically via an Ethernet cable, so fast transfer via Ethernet. But in addition to that, if you're out and about and you're shooting, and again, workflow speed is really important, via the USB-C connection, you can plug directly into a compatible mobile phone. Now that gives us the advantage of having the camera connected directly to 5G networks. So using USB, we have up to a 10 gigabit transfer speed. So in any areas with fantastically fast 5G networks, we can shoot straight from the camera back to our FTP servers. And if you think that hopefully this is a year of an Olympics, that's a really great function, being able to shoot and have instant access to really fast file transfer.
On the other side, we have our media card slots. As you would expect, that's a dual card slot, so it's really important to make sure you don't lose your work. We have the ability to shoot to either both cards at once or a relay system, however you want to set it up. We can either shoot JPEG to one card and RAW to another, and it takes 2 SD cards or 2 CF Express Type A cards. And the whole body of the camera is dust and moisture resistant, so it really is a work tool for the sort of person who wants to put the camera really through its paces and have both a fast workflow but incredible shooting capability. So that headline of 50 megapixels 30 times a second, it really is unprecedented. And that's also, it's worth saying, silently. So it really lends itself well to sports photography, the sorts of things like the golf where you might risk distracting a photographer with any sort of noise. This camera can be completely silent. It's probably also worth mentioning, if you're mentioning golf, the fact that we've also improved the readout speed of the sensor. Cameras can suffer from a rolling shutter effect where fast-moving objects appear curved. The sensor in this is 1.5 times better than our previous A9 Mark II, and we never got any complaints about that. So it's incredibly fast shooting. It's just, the whole thing is a sports car of a camera.
And very good for shooting sports cars because of that
Absolutely.
rolling shutter. And in fact, that's one of the questions. Thank you so much for your questions. Toya Nashodi, thank you very much for your question. We're saying, which is more suitable for sports photography, this A1 or the A9? And I guess, at least on one sense, you know, with the faster readout from the sensor, shutting out on that, on the rolling shutter, that would give this the +1 perhaps over the A9 Mark II.
Yeah, I mean, the A9 Mark II is a fantastic sports camera, and I see it at sports venues up and down the country. One of the slim advantages of not being able to go to football stadiums is you can pick out the photographers far more easy and see what kit that they're using. And the A9 Mark II is an absolutely fantastic piece of kit. It depends what style of photography you are. Most sports photographers, they press and hold. They shoot off multiple images and they capture the split second they want. A9 Mark II, fantastic 20 frames per second, but this at 30 frames per second just means those perfect moments. You've got a far better chance of getting that moment you're just trying to capture. Think of things that last for just a split second, a diver's fingers touching the water for the very first time. These sorts of things are far easier to capture using a camera which almost is capturing video. It's like video at 30 frames per second.
Yeah, exactly. Question about ISO as well. I can't remember if we covered that earlier on. Just talk to me about the ISO capabilities. I'll bundle Mark Fuller. Hello, Mark. Thank you for your question. Just talking about auto ISO range. Again, differences with the A9, if there are any. Just talk us along those lines.
The camera is a brand new sensor, and it's worth saying that we have a low rate ISO of 50. It's native ISO starts at around about 100, and it goes up to 102,000 ISO. So it's not quite the low light specialist as the A7S Mark III is, which has a maximum ISO of over 409,000, but it's still a very, very wide ISO range. And there's lots and lots of extremely clean ISOs. If you're a fan of low light work, then what you'll also notice with this camera is that in low light, those 759 phase autofocus points really make it easy to lock onto your subject. And of course, using an electronic viewfinder, which is what the E-mount system always has, it's actually slightly easier sometimes to see in really low light conditions because you're using an electronic viewfinder, which can be boosted and gained. But yeah, low light performance is the sort of thing that Sony have built their reputation on. And I'm glad to say that this camera is no different. It'll be great, especially for the sort of low light wildlife photography where you only do have a split second to capture those magical moments. One of them I always think it jumps to is bats, because a lot of people use triggers to fire cameras for bats. With this, I'm hoping people get far more shots straight out the camera without the need for additional accessories.
I'll just throw a couple of other questions into one. Final call for questions, please, in the last few moments we have with Sam. Just on some features that people are saying, does it have it, or will it have it, or is this the right camera for it? Philip says, does the A1 have focus bracketing? Jeremy's asking about focus stacking, long exposure. Yeah,
I have to
that's
say,
probably enough for now.
Focus stacking is one that keeps coming up, and we have a separate Sony talk function on the Photography Show website, and focus stacking is something that people have been asking about. All I can say is currently we don't have it, but we can feed it back to Tokyo that's been a strong focus from the people we've been speaking to during the photography show. What it does have is multi-pixel shift, which is the system where the camera moves the sensor by a fraction of a pixel or a pixel each time and takes the same image up to 16 times. By moving the sensor slightly, we super sample the shot. So we end up with, it's not quite 200 megapixels, we end up with 199 megapixel stills. The only caveat is because it's using multiple shots, your subject really needs to be completely still because any sort of movement will ruin the shot. So it's really good for taking pictures of models, as in physical models for websites or for archiving. Archiving especially, taking pictures of old books, old documents, they don't move. When it comes to outdoors, you'd be surprised by how often the trees get blown by the wind and you don't notice it. But 199 megapixels of still objects is a really cool feature. I have to confess, I haven't yet had a look at how big the resulting file, which is put together by the PC or Mac-based software, is. I suspect it might be quite sizable. How quick is that?
How quick is that 199 megapixel exposure? Is it, you mentioned movement could be an issue, so I can understand why for archival purposes and maybe architectural purposes that would be the right case, but is it a second, or is it still a fraction of a second we're talking here?
It's a fraction of a second, but it's worth saying you can set it to be longer, and you might say, well, why on earth would you want that? But some people will want to shoot with flash, so we give you the option to delay the shooting time so that your flash has got the required time to recharge and fire again. So again, I don't know if we've thought of everything, but everything that I can think of, this camera does. And I mentioned it before, but one of the real firsts for cameras, mirrorless has been around for a while now. We've enjoyed a good 10 years of E-mounts, and milestones don't come along all that often. There are updates, there are new cool cameras, there are things that sort of tweaks. This feels really different because this sets the benchmark that you can shoot electronically and silently with a flash. And that's never been done before. And I think for model photography, that's got real advantages. The fact that you don't have a physical shutter, which is what's normally required in flash, also means that it's completely blackout-free shooting. It means that we can continuously use technology like autofocus. If you're normally shooting with a flash gun and you're having to use a physical shutter, obviously with a mirrorless camera, every time the shutter comes down, it cuts off the light to the sensor, it cuts off the autofocus system. By being able to shoot with flash, with no physical shutter, with an electronic shutter, means we can continuously have that autofocus running and use the flash as we like without any system having to sacrifice one for the other. It's something really new, which maybe in other sorts of forums I haven't spoken about enough.
Well, unfortunately, you have spoken enough today. Indeed, we both have, because we're out of time. Sam, how quickly that, whatever it was, 35 minutes ran through. Final thoughts, talk to me, availability. Obviously, that's something people have been hanging on to, but it seems as though we're getting there. And kind of price point for this as well, before we wrap up.
Well, availability, it's available now, but it's worth saying that we have back orders. Stock is tight. We had loads of pre-orders for this camera, and we're doing our very, very best to get as much stock as possible. Whenever there's any meeting at Sony, we always put our hands up and say, give us as much as you can give us, because we have such demand for this product. There are 3 partner retailers as part of the photography show. I would recommend, if you're interested in one, speaking to them. They set the pricing, not me, but I think the estimated retail price is around about £6,300, which is an expensive camera, but you're almost getting 3 different cameras in one. So you may find that some photographers go from having an A7S Mark III and an A7R Mark IV to just an A1. Great piece of kit.
Super stuff. Well, thank you so much for chatting us through it today, Sam, and wish you all the very best. Hope to see you in person at a photography show before too long.
That would be a dream. Thank you, David.
Cheers.